Hi guys, and welcome back to another weekly What I've Watched. If you can hear a weird droning in the background, apologies. It's lawn mowing season, everyone's mowing lawns. It's nice and sunny in Ireland, usually. So apologies for that, and just let's get cracked on with what I watched last week. We kicked off the week with a series called The Cry. Now this is a series that's showing on Netflix at the moment. I seem to remember watching this in one sitting. The disappearance of a baby from a small coastal town in Australia is the catalyst for a journey into the disintegrating psychology of a young couple as they deal with an unregrettable tragedy under both the white light of public scrutiny and behind closed doors. So this one is very much a study of this couple's marriage. We're trying to get to the bottom of what's happened with the baby, who's taken it, when has it happened, who should have been watching it, whose fault is it, and we're really getting a proper window into this couple's marriage, their interactions, how they feel about one another. It says a lot more about them than the situation with the baby having gone missing. So this does seem to borrow heavily from the situation with Madeleine McCann, I have to say, but it's not exactly the same story, but it's a very similar premise with a lot of things people said after that. And a lot of the way the press especially looked at this young couple when they were making public appeals, and the way they looked at the McCanns at the same time, it's very, very similar in that respect. But it was well worth a watch. I enjoyed it. I think I gave it a 3 out of 5. Yeah, 3 out of 5. I watched it in one sitting. It was very easy to watch. So that's The Cry, and that is on Netflix at the moment. Next, I watched The Dead Girl in Apartment 3. Now, this is one that both Leo from Geek Legion of Doom and Aaron from Screen Stars had reviewed, and I quite liked, even with the flaws that they'd mentioned. It's my sort of subject matter. Now, the basic premise here is shortly after discovering the dead body of her roommate, a young woman becomes embroiled in supernatural shenanigans. So basically, this girl finds her roommate dead. There's no sign of why she's died. There's no trauma to the body. There's no signs of breaking and entering or anything like that. The police are kind of perplexed and puzzled. They have to do an autopsy, and all the while strange things are happening in the apartment, and this young girl is trying to figure out what happened and is just trying to be where she is. She's recently split up with her boyfriend. She's alone. She's frightened. Her performance is excellent, I have to say. In this movie, it had all the ingredients to be much, much better than it was. I think budgetary constraints really got in the way here, and we could have done with a little bit more a creative writing team. The premise was good, but there were certain situations set up where you knew something was going to appear, where you knew there was going to be a jump scare, which was a little predictable. It only is an hour and 15 minutes long. I wouldn't recommend it for the general viewing public. I would say if you like watching horrors, check it out. It's a decent little movie. It's not going to blow your socks off. It is very low budget, but the performance by the main lead made it worth watching for me. I give that one a 2 out of 5. Okay, and on to the next one, which couldn't be any further from Dead Girl in Apartment 3. This one is Lost Ollie. This one was brought to my attention when Sean from Lost in the Reel spoke about it. I knew nothing about it. I hadn't heard of it. I thought I'd probably have to wait a couple of months, as is usually the case, to see it, but it popped up on Netflix within a few days of Sean having mentioned it. So, the greatest adventures are the ones that bring us home. A patchwork rabbit with floppy ears and fuzzy memories embarks on an epic quest to find his best friend, the young boy he desperately loves. So it is as it seems. The little bunny is lost. He is in a quest. He meets other toys along the way. He's trying to find his way back to his boy. There is a lot of stuff happening in this young lad's life at the time, a lot of challenges, things that are very difficult. I bawled at this. I completely broke down near the end of this movie. It's desperately sad, it's joyful at the same time. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful, beautiful movie. While it is suitable for some children, there are bits in it that are a little bit darker, and I wouldn't recommend it for very young children. As an example, there are toys beating another toy up, and not in a playful way. It's quite a dark, menacing sort of scene, but it is the sort of thing that older children would love. I absolutely adored this. I could not find anything to rate down on this. The attention to detail, the sound design, the cinematography, when the little toys are moving and running, the foot, the actual noises when they touch things, the interactions, It's so beautiful put together. I absolutely adored it, and it's one of the extremely rare 5 out of 5s for me, so please check out Lost Ollie on Netflix at the moment. It is wonderful. So next, I have been wanting to see this for so long. This is My Dinner with Hervey. The reason I wanted to see this, 2 reasons. First of all, it stars Peter Dinklage, who, as everyone knows, I'm a massive fan of. Also, Jamie Dornan was recently interviewed on the Graham Norton show, and he talked about how Peter Dinklage helped him run lines for 50 Shades while working on this movie together. And Peter Dinklage obviously played the role of the girl from 50 Shades, whose name's completely escaped me. And the thought of Peter Dinklage and Jamie Dornan running lines of 50 Shades just filled me with amusement and delight, both at the same time. But they worked together on this movie, and I wanted to see it. So this is actually a story about Herve Villachez. Now, when I say his name, you might not know who I'm talking about. I will put up an image and you will instantly know who I'm talking about. Obviously a very famous James Bond villain, you will recognise him from that and some other work that he did. So this movie has been a long time in the making. Peter Dinklage has wanted to make this movie for many years. Unfortunately, Herve Villachez is no longer with us, he has since passed away. But this was actually being made while he was still alive, and they wanted to continue with the story. And due to the fact that this is a story about a journalist that went and spent that time with him, and it wasn't that long before Hervey actually died. So this is almost like a goodbye, like a love letter. So it says, his real life was the biggest fantasy of all. An unlikely friendship evolves over one wild night in LA between a struggling journalist and actor Herve Villachez, the world's most famous gun-toting dwarf, resulting in life-changing consequences for both. And it is exactly as it seems. It was really interesting. Even though I didn't know an awful lot about Herve himself, I did recognise him from TV work he'd done. He is very famous. Younger people may not particularly maybe recognise him. Peter Dinklage is amazing. Herve has got a very distinct voice, very distinct French accent. It's just, I can't really explain it. It's just very distinct. And Peter Dinklage nails it. You cannot hear Peter Dinklage in this at all. It's not him, it's someone else. And Jamie Dornan as the journalist is fabulous, fantastic. I can't say enough positive things about this. I loved it. It's 110 minutes, so just under the 2-hour mark. I could have easily watched another half hour and had more backstory, had more about him. I give it a 4 out of 5. I thought it was excellent, and I would thoroughly recommend you check that one out. Okay, so a couple of days later I watched Me Time. This is a new one that's popped up on Netflix with Kevin Hart and Mark Wahlberg. They have grown up together, they've been best friends, but their life has gone separate ways. Kevin Hart's character has settled into married life and parenthood, whereas Mark Wahlberg's character is still living the life. He's still doing the mad, wild things that he always did. Kevin Hart's character is the perfect stay-at-home dad, perfectly organised. He remembers everything. His wife is a busy architect, but he wants a little bit of me time, or people try and make him feel like he wants a little bit of me time, to do something he wants and to not have to be at anyone else's beck and call. And long story short, he ends up teaming back up with his old friend for a wild party to celebrate his friend's birthday, like they used to do every year back in the day. And we follow the hilarious antics that obviously ensue from this. There are a few laughs and giggles in this. I did laugh a few times in this. I like really dumb, stupid humour, quite irreverent humour, and there's a little bit of this in it. Toilet humour appeals to me. There's a bit of this in it. Now, I only give it a 2 out of 5 because it's very predictable. There is that scene in it where someone comes to a realisation and does a big speech to a load of people. That happens in a lot of movies. It just makes me cringe. I hate it. I'm having a moment of awakening. I'm going to tell this entire room full of strangers that don't know me from Adam. That just made me groan inwardly. I'm like, oh, what are you doing? So, yeah. Me Time. I think I gave it a, 2 out of 5 because it did make me giggle here and there. Okay, so next on the list we have Samaritan, which is Sylvester Stallone's new movie. Now, I had seen a few reviews about this, and most of them weren't particularly positive. It was very much, it's average. Sly Stallone's the best thing in it, but it's average. So, basic storyline. Now, before I watched this, I knew basically nothing about it. Like any of the intricate detail I wasn't aware of. So 25 years ago, the world's greatest hero vanished. 13-year-old Sam Cleary suspects that his mysteriously reclusive neighbour, Mr. Smith, is actually the legendary vigilante Samaritan, who was reported dead 20 years ago. With crime on the rise in the city on the brink of chaos, Sam makes it his mission to coax his neighbour out of hiding to save the city from ruin. So, obviously, Sylvester Stallone, this young boy, lives very close to him, actually right opposite him, and he thinks that Sylvester Stallone is this Samaritan, is this superhero. I really, with its flaws and everything, really enjoyed this movie. I have to say, I watched it with very low expectations and I came out having really enjoyed it. It is a bit lazy in places, but Sylvester Stallone is excellent. He's really settled into this role of this older. I thought he looked fantastic. The fact he's obviously let himself go grey, he looked awesome, really good to me. I love the avenue he's gone down when actors get to a particular age where they kind of like transition to a different kind of role that they play, but he can still bring it. He can still kick ass. He proves in this movie. I loved him in it. The young lad that's in this was also really impressive, his acting. We also have a very believable villain played by Pilo Asbæk, Cyrus. You probably remember him from Game of Thrones. He was a really unsavoury character in that also. But I can't criticise this movie. I really enjoyed it. It is a bit lazy in places. It's not going to be on the level with superhero movies you're used to, like Marvel movies. But I think, as I think Aaron said, it's better for it. It's more grounded. Obviously, we've got a lot of things happening that aren't believable in the slightest, but I really dug it. I liked the characters. I settled into the characters. I wanted to see what happened. And most importantly to me, I cared about the characters. So I gave that one a 3.5 out of 5. I've written corny, silly, but I enjoyed the hell out of it. And yeah, I stand by that, I did. So on that same evening, I watched Punishment Park. This is one, now I'm trying to remember, I think it may have been Andy from Forgotten World of Movies who mentioned this one. I'm not entirely sure, I think it was. Now, my dad, I've maybe mentioned this before, my dad's a big collector of movies. He's got so many movies. The list of like 10 movies I really should have seen, but I haven't. I was able to get most of them. I've only watched 2 of that list, which was Taxi Driver, which I got off my dad, and an anime one, and I've forgotten the name of it, which I didn't get from him. But anyway, he had this one, Punishment Park. This would be his kind of thing. So this movie was banned for many years, so let me give you the premise of Punishment Park. One of the most controversial movies ever made. In this fictional documentary, US prisons are at capacity, and President Nixon declares a state of emergency. All new prisoners, most of whom are connected to the anti-war movement, are now given the choice of jail time or spending 3 days in Punishment Park, where they will be hunted for sport by federal authorities. The prisoners invariably choose the latter option, but learn that between the desert heat and the brutal police officers, their chances of survival are slim. Now, not very many people have watched this one. There you go. That's the people on my list that have watched it. Could have been Leon, maybe, that I saw. I cannot remember where I actually saw this movie recommended. Now, I'd read somewhere that it was like a realistic battle royale. It isn't. It's not anything like that. It's set in a courtroom with individuals with very different opinions. You've got the pacifists that are protesters, that are anti-war, the men that have ran away rather than, this is set around the time of Vietnam. So these men have left rather than actually be signed up for war, and that's a criminal offence. They're deserters, or I think they called it hindering the war effort. Obviously they don't want to fight, they don't agree with the war, they don't agree with, we all know now looking back about Vietnam and all why it was wrong, but there are a lot of very different opinions in this. What makes this interesting is this was done in 1971. And a lot of the opinions and stuff that happens in this is really relatable to stuff that happened many years later. There's a scene with one of the young black protesters and a couple of police officers that's especially really uncomfortable, given stuff that's happened in the last decade with regards to police officers and young black males. It was very uncomfortable to watch. But what interested me about this and reading about it is a lot of the people within this, not everyone, but in those courtroom scenes, a lot of people there were not actors. They were not allowed to meet people of the opposite view. They were put into this courtroom, they had very different opinions, and they were left to argue, to basically ad lib. There wasn't a script. They had to put forward how they felt, and someone on the opposing side would then put forward how they felt. So you had the establishment, I suppose, people that were like very much for the war and for the government and for law, and then you had the people that were law-abiding citizens but were very anti-war, were very anti-violence, didn't agree with Vietnam, would protest, all this kind of thing. And that is what makes this movie really, really interesting to me. If you're going to watch this wanting to see horrible carnage, you know, battle royale style, people hunting other people down, that does not happen. We do intersperse back and forth to the desert where these individuals have been released, to their worsening state. They're hungry, they're tired, they're obviously extremely exhausted, they're thirsty, they're too warm, and there are police officers just being complete and utter buggers. I don't know what word to use, but we do have loss of life near the end of this. Things do hit a crescendo. It's not interspersed through the whole movie. The whole movie is mainly, it's very political, it's very much about discussion, it's very much about I think it said at the beginning of this movie, the police and establishment and law needed to do this in order to allow people to train, to basically target practice. So it sets it up as going to be like a really brutal movie, but it is just, it's very political. We do get a bit of brutality in this, to be honest, near the end, but it's over very quickly, it's not very graphic, and you're just left with a really horrid taste in your mouth as to war. I'm such an anti-war person, I can't even begin to tell you. So this interested me. It won't appeal to everyone. It is an old movie, 71. Even though it looks dated, the viewpoints, everything that's put forward is very much on point. It's very much still arguments we have today. As I said, that scene with that young black protester and the police officers I found very uncomfortable, and I could relate it directly to something in my lifetime that I've seen. So Punishment Park. I do apologise. I noticed that I've stopped recording the screen. I've talked too much and haven't noticed. So I scored that one a 4 out of 5. It is worth a watch if that interests you. If what I've just said makes you think, yeah, I want to see this, it's well worth watching. You can actually pick this up on eBay. It was banned for many, many years, but it's readily available to buy relatively cheap. So that's Punishment Park. Next we have, last night I watched Memory. So there were two movies that didn't really appeal to me. One was Samaritan and one was Memory. And I watched both of them. I watched Memory because I thought, well, I've put off watching Samaritan because people were a bit meh about it and I really liked it, so let's give Memory a try. So Memory is one of Liam Neeson's movies. Liam Neeson, who has these days become very typecast into a very specific role since he did Tekken. I adore Liam Neeson's early work. He's a fantastic actor, but these days I don't feel he gets to show how good he is. Some of his earlier work is astounding. I mean, Moll Flanders is wonderful. So in this movie, his mind is fading, his conscience is clear. He's a hitman and he has early onset Alzheimer's. So he's beginning to forget things, and in his line of work as a hitman, that's not something that you can do. You can't forget the small things to do your job correctly. Alex is an assassin for hire. He finds he's become a target after he refuses to complete a job for a dangerous criminal organisation. With the crime syndicate and FBI in hot pursuit, Alex has the skills to stay ahead, except for one thing. He is struggling with severe memory loss, affecting his every move. Alex must question his every action and whom he can ultimately trust. So that's where we're going from. What he's asked to do involves hurting a child, and he's not going to do this. He is a hitman. Although he kills people for a living and he's a bad guy, there is a conscience underneath that. And I think he realises in this movie that he's got to a stage where he probably can't continue the line of work that he's continuing. You can see scores there that people have given it. We go from a 3.5 down to a 1. What did I score this one? I think a 2. So I found it very generic. I found it was like watching a movie I'd seen 100 times before. Liam Neeson's performance in it is excellent. He is fantastic in it. I do love his acting, but I do feel the vulnerability of his character and the Alzheimer's really brought something else out that we don't normally get to see in his action movies. So we have the action hero who's kicking ass, and we also have this vulnerability where, to me, his acting skills were able to seep through. So yes, I enjoyed it. I did find myself getting a bit bored. I thought it was a little bit long. I didn't really care about a lot else that was happening outside of what was happening to Liam Neeson's character itself. The sort of like the police involved, the FBI, there's a bit of corruption, there's, you know, I just wanted to know what was going on with Neeson through the whole movie. So he was the pull for me in this, and while I loved his performance, I thought it dragged a little bit and it was a little bit dull in places. So 2 out of 5 for that one for me. And finally, last night in bed, I watched The Immaculate Room. Now this, I see Sean's given it a 1.5 out of 5. This is one that I think will really appeal to some people and won't to others. Your average moviegoer that isn't interested in this kind of thing will get nothing from this. This follows 2 individuals, a couple that agree to stay in a room called the Immaculate Room for 50 days, and if they succeed, they will win $5 million. The room is completely white. The only things in it is like a bit of a chair type thing and a bed. Nothing else is in the room. They have a bathroom. They're allowed nothing for stimulation. They're not allowed to like read, to write, any of those things. And they must survive 50 days in there. They are allowed 2 treats each at this stage. The first treat will cost them £100,000 of their balance. The second treat will cost them $250,000 each. So we're talking £700,000 here for treats. And as an example, I'm not going to tell you what the treats are. One of the treats is something very banal and simple. Another one is something that's designed to set the cat among the pigeons. It's designed to create conflict between this couple. I personally love anything psychological. I love anything that's a character study, like a look at a relationship. I quite enjoyed this. And the performances we have 2 quite big. With Kate Bosworth and Emile Hirsch in this, that are the main characters. We mainly only see them in this movie. They both perform fantastically. There are obviously problems in the relationship. There is issues and trauma that they've both had in their life to deal with. I liked it. I enjoyed it. I liked the relationship. I liked the issues that were brought up. I liked the challenge. I hated the ending so much, I can't even tell you. To me, an ending can either elevate or just, what's the opposite word? They can ruin a movie, and the ending was terrible. And the ending pulled it from a 3 out of 5 to a 2.5 out of 5 for me, because I thought it was ridiculous. But I did enjoy the journey to get to the ending. This is something that they actually did I think in the UK as a reality TV kind of thing. They made people stay in a room with nothing for, I think it was only like 2 days or something, and people couldn't do it. There were people after several hours, oh no, I can't do this. But I've always thought, I think they're allowed, they were maybe allowed pen and paper or something. And I mean, I would love the idea of a couple of days in a room by myself with pen and paper. I'd be over the moon. I like my own company. I'm not the most sociable person in the world. I can amuse myself. I was an only child. I can amuse myself really easily. I can lie and just basically daydream for literally hours happily. So I would have loved to be given this opportunity for $5 million. I would ace this. I know I would. But yeah, Immaculate Room, I'd say check it out if it sounds appealing to you. Be warned and be prepared that the ending is very anticlimactic. That's the only way I'll put it. So that's what I've watched this week. I am on a live stream hopefully this Wednesday night with Play Tender guy Pete. I know he had a really bad throat. I think it was throat infection last week, so needed to cancel. So fingers crossed it goes forward this week. But the next morning my son starts big school, high school for the first time, so I have a very early rise on Thursday morning to get everything ready because it is quite a ways from our house. So yeah, I won't be having a massively late night on Wednesday night, but if you are around on Wednesday night, please pop over to Playtendo Guy's channel and say hi. Hopefully soon, now that my son is back to school, it may free me up a little more time to get back to the videos I like to do, the sort of movies based on true stories, creepy videos, that kind of thing. So hopefully we'll get some of those coming up in the near future. But thanks so much for watching, guys, and I look forward to checking in with you next week for another What I've Watched. Over and out from Lisa Lives.